Hey, welcome back to Totally Rad Guitars. Next to me is a 2018 Splawn Street Rod. This is a 40 watt amp powered by two EL34s. That's essentially a miniaturized version of the Quick Rod circuit, which is Splawn's most popular model at the moment. Just some history. Scott Splawn is the owner, proprietor, and designer of Splawn amps. They're based out of Dallas, North Carolina. In the 90s, he opened a guitar shop where he repaired instruments and then started, progressively selling instruments and amps and things. Then he took his own amps and wanted to be able to repair and modify amplifiers and started modifying Marshall amps. Eventually, word caught on through internet forums and word of mouth that these were really great amps, that he could take your Marshall and make it sound really incredible. So people started sending him their Marshall amps, and he was a Marshall dealer at the time, so he would take new Marshall amps that he got at cost, modify them, and then resell them, which is pretty sweet. Sometime in the early 2000s, Marshall amplifiers had a huge increase in price, and he started sourcing components to build his own amps from the ground up with his own, design based loosely on his modifications to the Marshall circuits. So that was around, the first amplifiers with the Splawn name came out in 2004. Now there's a couple of different, and you can't really talk about this amp without also talking about the Quick Rod, of which I have two over here, which I'll be sure to demo a little bit in a video. But basically the Quick Rod was the first version of the Splawn modded Marshall amp. The original Quick Rod has a high and a low input, and no gears, just a clean channel and a gain channel. And those are pretty much based on sort of the JCM 800, 2203, 2204 single channel architecture, just with an added clean channel and way more gain. And it's, pretty standard. So the model right after that came around 2006. And that one, you can tell because the input jack is offset slightly. It's a little bit further down, which I'll show in a picture here. Those models there's only three, the original Quick Rod and the 2006 models only have three preamp tubes. It's still a JCM 800 type circuit, just modified. And on that one, the 06 model, the clean channel, it's not clean at all. It's really more like a crunch channel, and they sort of interact. Like if you turn the gain up on the lead channel, overdrive channel, it affects the gain on the clean channel and so on, because they're sharing tube gain stages. And then in 2000, I have one from 2008, but I think maybe the changeover was sometime around 2007. There's a third version of the Quick Rod where now the lead channel is voiced a lot darker and a lot more smooth and refined sounding, plus a fourth preamp tube, which is exclusively used on the clean channel. And those have an actual, true, very clean channel, although there's a gain control on it, so you can get a little bit of grit, but it's, much more usable. Then the latest version and kind of the current version of the Splawn Quick Rod type circuit came out in 2012. So the 2012 and later models, like this 2018 Street Rod, all have that latest version of the circuit. It's designed to be brighter like the 06 model because that was so well received, but it has more gain and more bass. It's a lot more modern voicing than the original 06 circuit revision. I really like the 06 revision, and I like the 08 revision for similar reasons. The 2012 revision, it's kind of, it sort of gets away from the more vintagey tones and into more modern tones, but it can still be dialed back to, to do classic rock and stuff, no problem. Just sort of adds to the versatility. Now, the Street Rod, the only difference really between the Street Rod and the Quick Rod, obviously besides the form factor and the fact that the Street Rod only has two power tubes instead of four, is the clean channel has volume, treble, and bass. The Quick Rods all have gain, volume, treble, and bass. So this one, the clean channel, even though it's very, very similar to the quick rod, it is slightly different in that you don't have a gain control. The gain is effectively fixed. Which is fine. The clean channel on this amp is really, really great and very, very full sounding. But obviously the highlight of an amp like this really is the gain channel. Now the overdrive channel has two modes. There's OD1 and OD2. If you plug into a Splawn without a foot switch, like say you go into a guitar store and you spot one of these and you want to try it out, if you plug into it without the foot switch, it's on the gain channel OD2 all the time. The only way to get to OD1 or the clean channel is with the foot switch, which very conveniently, here in the back, there are two jacks, a jack A and B, and the foot switch is either a 3-button or a 4-button foot switch. Now the 3-button foot switch allows you to change from clean to overdrive channel, and then there's a second button to switch from overdrive 1 to overdrive 2, and then a solo boost function. There's an extra solo volume knob that boosts the volume up so you can stand out a little bit more for lead lines. Now the effects loop is not switchable, and none of these amps have reverb, digital, or spring. The jacks on the back, though, conveniently, if you happen to get one of these that doesn't have the original foot switch, they're just regular 1/4-inch jacks, so there's no like fancy connectors or weird cables or anything you have to worry about. You can actually hop, I have these orange foot switches, I have like an old Marshall 1-button foot switch, and you may have to tweak them or maybe like reverse some wires or something in the foot switch, but you can get by just plugging a standard 1/4-inch jack foot switch in here. And if you happen to have two-button foot switches, both with 1/4-inch jacks, you could plug them both in, and you'd get the full functionality of the 4-button foot switch. Let me show off the 4-button foot switch here. So this is the foot switch, the 4-button version. So you've got clean to overdrive channel switch. Now, just like the 3-button, you have overdrive 1 and 2 and solo boost, but the 4-button foot switch, which only works on Splawns made after a certain serial number, I'll have to double check what that is, but I'll flash it up on the video here. Splawns after this serial number can use this 4-button foot switch, and it has this added control called mode. Now, on the front panel of the drive, on the drive channel, there's a rotary switch that has 3 positions. So there's first gear, second gear, and third gear. And the idea is that in first gear, you have what's called a hot rod plexi mode. It doesn't really sound like a plexi to me on any of these amps, but that's beside the point. It's really more just a general, like you're in this region of gain kind of suggestion. Second gear is a hot rod JCM 800, and third gear is super hot rod JCM 800, which to my ear mostly just adds a lot of bass. The gain between channels 2 and 3 feels pretty similar. The gain on channel 1 is definitely reduced along with the bass for a little bit more of a classic sound. A lot of guys really like first gear. I think it just sounds awesome to throw it onto third gear and just rip it. This mode switch essentially allows you to switch between those different gears, with a caveat. If you have the knob set to gear 2 on the amp, then this button does nothing. If you have it set to gear 3, when the switch is not lit and you press it in, it switches to gear 3, whatever you have selected on the front panel. When you select it so that it's not lit, you're on gear 2. So you can only switch, say, between 2 and 3 or 1 and 2. You can't switch from gear 1 to gear 3 or anything like that, which is a shame really, because I find that I don't really use gear 2 very often. I'm mostly using either gear 1 for classic kind of tones or gear 3 all out for like metal and high gain tones. And I would love to be able to switch from gear 1 to 3, because that would be effectively like having like a clean, crunch, and saturated lead channel all in one amp. That would be awesome. So maybe there's a mod or something along those lines that could make that happen, but at the moment at least you can only switch, you can't switch from 1 to 3. So Anyway, so I'm going to run down the controls real quick. We already talked about the clean channel with volume, treble, and bass. On the lead channel, you've got the mode selector, like I mentioned, gain, volume, the solo volume, treble, middle, bass, and presence. So pretty standard on the front panel. On the back panel, next to the effects loop, on all later models, for example, my 2008 does not have this. But I've had a 2009 Quick Rod, which I sold off because it sounded exactly like my 08 one, and I didn't need to. Those have there is a loop master volume control, which is essentially just a second master volume right after the effects loop. So like this volume is pre-effects loop on the front panel, leading into the power amp, so it'll go to the effects loop, and then the effects loop has a volume on its own which is always engaged. And the nice thing about that is between the two volumes you can bring this amp down pretty well to almost bedroom friendly volumes, whereas my 2008 Quick Rod, I actually use a volume pedal in the loop to keep that one quiet because the taper on the volumes is not really bedroom friendly. That amp goes from dead quiet to breaking your windows loud very quickly, so that would be nice to have on that amp. This amp has that built in, as well as a half power switch to knock it down from 40 watts to 20 watts. And then there aren't really any other fancy features. Really, the whole concept here is just great tone right out of the box, and it certainly succeeds at that. So I'm going to demonstrate here a little bit. This is the clean channel. I'm playing a 1989 Kramer Beretta 1 snakeskin. The bridge pickup is a Duncan JB and original Floyd Rose. Now these, the bass and treble controls make it sound like it's pretty restricted, but they actually interact a lot. So right now I have it dialed about where I like it, where there's just a little bit of sparkle, but it's very full sounding. But I can roll the bass off a little bit and the treble up, and it gets a little bit more jangly. Or the other way around and kind of get more of a jazz tone. But I like them just a hair to the right of center, and that seems to be a good compromise. Very cool. So let's get into the real meat of this amp. I'm going to switch over to the drive channel. I'm on, the difference between overdrive 1 and 2 modes are the most evident in first gear because it's a little bit more noticeable at lower gain settings. So let me switch, I'm going to go OD1, first gear. I've got the gain up pretty high. It's at about 3 o'clock, but I'll just leave it there throughout the video so you can hear what it sounds like. This amp really, it doesn't need any kind of boost or anything like that, but if you like, you can roll the gain back a little bit and use your pedals as boosts to get kind of a different flavor. One thing I do notice about all three of these Splawn amps is that no matter what boost you use, the characteristics of the boost don't really carry through too much, and I think it's because they're so full sounding in the bass and lower mids that some of the characteristics of different pedals and even pickups don't really come through that much. And I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying that they're not clear or anything like that, but they're definitely not the best pedal platforms. You're buying an amp like this because it pretty much negates the need to have pedals. You can get all of your dirt from the amp. Whereas like JCM 800, it's crystal clear and it really makes a great pedal platform because all the different pedals, you can hear the individual characteristics through an amp like that because it's really bright and open sounding. This amp is not really designed for the same purpose. So let's jump over first gear. Anyway, something along those lines. So that's first gear. I switched to OD2 partway through there. I'll mark on the video when I actually did that. It's not really that evident of a change in the room. I'll listen back to the recording and see how clear it is, but it's not a very clear, jump. So I'm on OD2 now. I'm going to set this front panel control. Oh, that was second gear. I forgot to press in mode. So, okay. Let's do second gear, and then I'll hit the mode switch to knock down a first gear. So there you go. So you can tell first gear is a lot brighter. But still plenty of gain. So now I'm going to switch over, let's go to third gear. So, and then I'll just show you what it can do. This is all out max gain and max bass. And keeping with kind of the theme, we'll play yeah, so it's got a lot of gain, but it is definitely a bit more on the polite side, and I think part of that is just because it really fills the room with sound, but it doesn't quite have that like raspy, harsh attack that like an amp. Say if you're gonna play some really heavy thrash metal or something like that, it doesn't quite do that. Now I do have the treble, middle, and bass are all pretty much in the middle. Now it does have slightly more interactive EQ, but it's not super drastic. But let's try, I'll try taking the treble up a bit and roll the mids down and the bass up and just see if we can get some kind of a little bit more of a thrash sort of sound now. I don't really know any Metallica songs beside that one, so anyway, yeah, so even with the controls set pretty extreme, you still have a lot of mids and bass. I mean, I have the mids rolled way back, and it's still not really like a raspy thrash kind of tone. Yeah, I mean, that's all the controls totally maxed out, and it still never really, it stays pretty polite the whole way through, which I like. This is a great lead tone in this amp, and I mean, it's so saturated. I mean, it's on Gear 3, I mean, it's pretty close to rivaling, say, like 5150 or 6505 kind of saturation. Which is really sweet because it just totally eliminates any need for pedals. It stays nice and tight and firm the whole way through. So yeah, this is a killer amp. And this one in particular has a Celestion G12M65 Creamback in it. They can also be had with a Eminence manufactured Splawn small block speaker. I don't know how those sound. I've never had one, but all reviews are pretty glowing about those, so I think they're pretty good. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good one.